You think your country is in trouble. The economy is weird. The politicians are worse. That's fine. Historically speaking, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. Empires have been collapsing for thousands of years, and almost every single one of them made the same mistake. Not war, not famine, not natural disaster. They destroyed themselves from the inside by doing something spectacularly, almost impressively stupid. At its peak, the Roman Empire controlled roughly 5 million square kilometers, over 60 million people. 1,200 years of history, the most powerful civilization the Western world had ever seen. And they destroyed it by deciding they didn't need their own army anymore. For most of its history, Rome's legions were Roman citizens, men who had something to lose, disciplined, loyal, terrifying to everyone who wasn't them. Then, slowly, Rome started hiring mercenaries instead, outsiders, people who had no particular reason to care whether Rome survived. Rome essentially handed its own defense to people whose home countries Rome had previously conquered. This seemed fine for a while. Then, in 376 AD, a massive group of Visigoths arrived at the Roman border asking for asylum. Rome said yes, let them in, then immediately started treating them so badly that the Visigoths decided to burn everything down. In 410 AD, the Visigoths sacked Rome. The city that had been untouched for 800 years was looted in 3 days. Not because Rome was weak, because Rome had decided it didn't need to defend itself anymore. The Western Roman Empire officially collapsed in 476 AD, 66 years after the Visigoths walked through the front door. Rome didn't fall because of barbarians. Rome fell because Rome let the barbarians in and then gave them a reason to burn it down. But Rome was not alone. The Mongol Empire was the largest contiguous land empire in human history. 24 million square kilometers, roughly a quarter of the entire Earth's land surface. Genghis Khan built this empire through pure, terrifying military discipline. His armies were meritocratic. The best soldiers rose. Everyone else got out of the way. He united warring tribes, conquered most of Asia, and built the infrastructure for the largest empire ever seen. Then, Genghis Khan died. And his sons immediately started arguing about who was in charge. The empire was divided between his sons and grandsons. Each one ruled their own chunk, and those chunks spent the next 100 years fighting each other. The Mongols had conquered most of the known world, then immediately turned around and conquered each other. By the mid-1300s, the unified Mongol Empire was gone, replaced by competing successor states that spent their energy destroying each other instead of maintaining what they had built. Genghis Khan spent his entire life building something extraordinary. His descendants spent their entire lives tearing it apart. The pattern was the same as Rome. Build something great, forget why it worked, watch it fall. The Aztec Empire at its height controlled most of central Mexico, millions of people, hundreds of cities, and they maintained this empire through a system of tribute. Conquered peoples paid taxes, in goods, in labor, and in something else. The Aztecs practiced large-scale ritual human sacrifice, thousands of people per year, from conquered tribes taken to the temples at the top of the pyramids. Now here is the part that matters. Every single tribe they sacrificed people from had family members who remembered, who told their children. When Hernan Cortés arrived in 1519 with roughly 500 Spanish soldiers, he should have been destroyed immediately. Instead, every tribe the Aztecs had ever mistreated immediately allied with the Spanish against them. Cortés didn't conquer the Aztecs. The Aztecs' victims did. The Aztec Empire fell in 1521, 2 years after Cortés arrived, with 500 soldiers. Not because Spain was unstoppable, because the Aztecs had made every neighbor they had into an enemy. The Ottoman Empire lasted 600 years, from 1299 to 1922. At its peak, it spanned 3 continents, Southeastern Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa. For centuries, it was the most administratively sophisticated empire in the world. Then, in the 1800s, the rest of the world industrialized. And the Ottomans didn't. Their military technology fell behind, their economy fell behind, their infrastructure fell behind. But the real problem wasn't the technology gap, It was that the people in charge refused to admit there was a gap at all. Reformers who tried to modernize were removed, executed in some cases. The system protected itself instead of adapting. The Ottoman Empire didn't collapse because Europe was stronger. It collapsed because it chose to stay exactly as it was while the world changed around it. Napoleon Bonaparte is probably the most talented military commander in European history. He rose from relatively obscure origins in Corsica to control most of continental Europe. By 1812, he had defeated Austria, Prussia, Spain, Portugal, and most of Italy, twice each in some cases. Then he decided to invade Russia. In June 1812, Napoleon marched into Russia with an army of roughly 600,000 soldiers. Russia didn't fight him. Russia just kept retreating and burning everything behind them. Napoleon reached Moscow in September. The city was empty. And then Moscow burned. Napoleon had conquered an empty, burning city in the middle of Russia in September. The Russian winter arrived, and Napoleon had not planned for the Russian winter. His army began the retreat in October. The temperature dropped to -30 degrees. Of the 600,000 soldiers who entered Russia, roughly 100,000 made it back. Napoleon's empire didn't survive the damage. Within 2 years, he was exiled to Elba. The greatest military mind of his generation had destroyed his own empire by making one decision that every general in history had been warned about. Don't invade Russia in winter. It's right there in the manual. So, what do all of these empires have in common? None of them were destroyed by an outside force they couldn't have stopped. Rome chose to outsource its own defense. The Mongols chose to fight each other instead of maintaining what they built. The Aztecs chose to make enemies of every single person around them. The Ottomans chose to stop adapting, and Napoleon chose to invade Russia in winter. Every single one of them had the information they needed to avoid the mistake. Rome knew outsourcing defense was risky. The Mongol successors knew division would destroy them. The Aztecs knew their neighbors hated them. The Ottomans knew they were falling behind. And Napoleon definitely knew about Russian winters. They did it anyway, because power, at a certain scale, starts to believe it is exempt from the rules that apply to everyone else. The rules that bring down empires are not complicated. Don't outsource what keeps you alive. Don't destroy what you built. Don't make more enemies than you can manage. Don't stay exactly as you are while the world changes around you. And for the love of everything, do not invade Russia in winter. These empires were not stupid. They were not unlucky. They were not defeated by superior forces. They were destroyed by choices, specific, avoidable, sometimes impressively dumb choices made by people who should have known better. And you exist, right now, in this moment, because your ancestors survived every single empire that tried to drag them down with it.
The Byzantine Empire was, for most of its existence, the most sophisticated civilization in the Western world. It lasted over 1,000 years. From 330 AD to 1453, Constantinople, their capital, was the largest and wealthiest city in Europe for most of the Middle Ages. For centuries, the walls of Constantinople were considered essentially impenetrable. Multiple armies tried, multiple armies failed. Then, in 1082, the Byzantine Emperor Alexios I made a decision that would take 400 years to fully destroy the empire. He was facing military threats from the Normans. He needed help. So he asked Venice. Venice agreed to help, in exchange for trading rights across the entire Byzantine Empire, tax-free, permanently. His meant Venice could trade anywhere in Byzantine territory without paying a single tax, while Byzantine merchants had to pay full taxes. Within decades, Venetian merchants had effectively taken over Byzantine trade. The Byzantines had outsourced their own economy to a foreign city-state. But it gets worse. In 1204, Venice helped organize the Fourth Crusade. The Fourth Crusade was supposed to go to the Holy Land. Instead, Venice redirected it to Constantinople. The Crusaders, who were supposedly Christian allies of Byzantium, sacked Constantinople in 1204. For 57 years, the Byzantine Empire ceased to exist. replaced by a Latin empire controlled largely by Venice. The Byzantines eventually reclaimed Constantinople in 1261, but the empire they reclaimed was a shadow of what it had been. Economically destroyed, militarily weakened, territorially reduced to a city and its immediate surroundings. For the next 2 centuries, Byzantium survived on inertia, not because it was strong, because nobody had bothered to finish it off yet. In 1953, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II showed up with the largest cannon ever built at the time and 70,000 soldiers. Constantinople fell in 53 days. The Byzantine Empire, 1,123 years of history, ended because in 1082, an emperor needed a favor and gave away too much to get it. Rome outsourced its army. Byzantium outsourced its economy. The result was the same. In the 1500s, the Spanish Empire was the most powerful force on earth. They controlled the Americas. They controlled the Atlantic trade routes. They had the largest navy in the world. And from their colonies in the Americas, an almost incomprehensible amount of silver and gold was flowing into Spain. Between 1500 and 1650, Spain received roughly 180,000 tons of silver from the Americas. This should have made Spain unimaginably wealthy for centuries. Instead, it caused one of the worst economic collapses in European history. The problem was inflation. When you flood an economy with too much money, the money becomes worth less. Spain pumped so much silver into Europe that prices across the continent rose by up to 500% over 150 years. Spain's own workers couldn't compete with cheap imports. Spanish manufacturing collapsed. Spanish agriculture collapsed. Spain became dependent on imported goods paid for with silver. When the silver ran out, there was nothing left. Spain declared bankruptcy 4 times between 1557 and 1596, under the same king. Think about that. The richest empire in the world, bankrupt, 4 times in 40 years.
The silver didn't make Spain rich. It made Spain addicted to wealth without the infrastructure to sustain it. By the 1600s, the Spanish Empire was still enormous on paper, but it was hollow. It had gold, it had no economy. They had everything, they built nothing, and they were confused about why they were poor. 7 empires, 7 different stories, 7 different mistakes. But here is what is actually remarkable. Every single one of these mistakes was completely avoidable. Rome could have kept its legions. The Mongols could have agreed on a succession plan. The Aztecs could have tried diplomacy. The Ottomans could have industrialized. Byzantium could have charged Venice full price. Spain could have built factories instead of spending silver, and Napoleon could have literally just not invaded Russia. The collapse of every empire in history follows a pattern so consistent that historians have a name for it: Imperial overstretch. The moment when an empire's ambitions exceed its ability to sustain them. Every empire on this list reached a point where they believed the rules no longer applied to them, and every single one of them was wrong. The most dangerous moment for any power, empire, company, person, is not when they are weak. It is when they are at their most powerful and start believing they are permanent. Nothing built by human beings is permanent. Not Rome, not the Mongols, not Byzantium, not Spain, not Napoleon, not the Ottomans, not the Aztecs, not anything you can name. The question is never whether something will end. The question is whether it ends because of external pressure or because the people inside it made it end themselves. Every empire in this video chose the second option. You exist right now because your ancestors lived through all of it. Through every empire that rose, dominated, made catastrophically dumb decisions, and fell. Through Rome's collapse, through the Mongol fragmentation, through the Aztec War, through the Ottoman decline, through Napoleon's Russian winter, through Byzantium's betrayal, through Spain's golden collapse. All 7, and here you are. The dumbest ways empires destroyed themselves weren't really dumb at all. They were human. Completely, recognizably, embarrassingly human. Arrogance, short-sightedness, greed, pride, the belief that the rules don't apply to you. These are not ancient problems. They are Tuesday. They are the meeting you had this morning. They are the decisions someone made last week that everyone around them could see was wrong. The empires are gone. The mistakes are still here. Somewhere, right now, someone is making the exact same choice that brought down Rome.
Subscribe to Just About Human.
Your ancestors survived every empire on this list. The least you can do is hit subscribe.